Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers. I'm your host, Miriam Zian, and here are your top stories for tonight. A Zionist war machine killed 75 Palestinians and injured 284 others in Gaza during the past 24 hours amid continuing violence. Next, the UN Security Council holds a confidential meeting on Gaza assaults, and Algeria proposes resolution to halt Rafah violence. International support grows for Algeria's Gaza resolution as Russia denounces continued civilian casualties despite ICJ order. And the World Central Kitchen halts operations in Rafah amid intensified Israeli attacks, citing mass displacement. Also coming up, South Africans vote in pivotal election as ANC's 30-year dominance faces unprecedented challenge. Hello and welcome back to our program. Palestinian Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip announced on Wednesday that the death toll from the Zionist war had risen to 36,171 martyrs and 81,420 injured since October 7. The same source said in its daily statistical report that the occupation committed 6 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip, killing 75 and injuring 284 during the past 24 hours. Health authorities in Gaza added that a number of victims are still under the rubble and on the roads, and ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them. The Al-Qassam Brigade, the military wing of the Hamas movement, announced that its fighters managed to target a Zionist force made up of 15 soldiers, killing some of them and wounding others east of the city of Rafah, in the south of the Gaza Strip. Earlier on Wednesday, the Al-Qassam Brigades announced that its fighters also managed to carry out a complex operation after luring a Zionist force into an ambush near Al-Shoka school east of the city of Rafah, killing 4 and wounding a number of others. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas strongly condemned what it described as the Biden administration's insistence on turning a blind eye and denying the horrific massacres committed by the Israeli occupation army against Palestinian refugees in Rafah, despite the appalling scenes resulting from these attacks. Hamas stated that the remarks made by the spokesperson for the U.S. National Security Council, John Kirby, that the Israeli entity has not yet crossed the red line set by President Biden, clearly indicates the U.S. administration's disregard for civilian lives and its complicity in their killing, especially with preliminary investigations suggesting that the bombs used against the refugees are made in the U.S. Algeria presented a draft resolution calling on the occupation to immediately stop its aggression against Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. Algeria's representative to the United Nations, Ammar Ben Jama, said that the text is short and decisive and aims to stop the killing in Rafah. Ben Jama expressed Algeria's condemnation of the occupation's raids on the tents of displaced people in Rafah, which led to the killing of more than 45 people, including women and children.
Since, upon instruction of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria, as a responsible member of the Security Council, and with the support of the Arab group, has decided to submit a draft resolution urging everyone in this Council to shoulder its responsibilities. We hope that this concise draft resolution can gather the support of everyone in this Council. We need a united Council. We need a unified Council. Because waiting for the occupying power to voluntarily abide by international law and Security Council resolution is pointless.
Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Ben Jama, also stressed that the settlement projects in the West Bank are turning the lives of Palestinians into a dangerous nightmare, especially in light of the occupation authorities' insistence on demolishing Palestinian homes. Ben Jama expressed in this context his hope for increasing recognition of the state of Palestine.
Resolution 2334, for instance, clearly states that settlements are illegal and constitute a flagrant violation of international law. Despite this, around 800,000 settlers currently reside illegally in the West Bank, making life a nightmare for Palestinians.
The UN Security Council swiftly held a confidential meeting on Tuesday to discuss the escalating Zionist assaults on the densely populated region. Algeria's ambassador to the United Nations, Ammar Ben Jama, stated that the Algerian proposed draft resolution aimed to stop killing in Rafah. Marwa Belawar.
At Algeria's request, the UN Security Council convened an urgent closed-door session on Tuesday evening to address the situation in Rafah amid intensified Zionist attacks on the densely populated area. An Algerian move meant to realize Palestinian rights and to confront the brutal crimes of the Zionist occupation against innocent Palestinians. Algeria's permanent mission to the United Nations submitted a draft resolution to the UN Security Council demanding that the Zionist entity immediately cease its military offensive in Rafah.
For sure, Algeria will circulate this afternoon a draft resolution on Rafah. It will be a short text, a decisive text to stop the killing in Rafah.
The Algerian draft text, using the strongest Security Council language, was resolute and definitive in addressing the dispute. It echoed global stances against Zionist aggression, contrasting with Washington's alignment, and called for an immediate ceasefire to be adhered to by all involved parties.
These attacks occurred just 24 hours after an order from the International Court of Justice, demanding the occupying authority to cease its assault on Rafah. The International Court of Justice order is legally binding, and the Israeli occupation is bound by the United Nations Charter, including Article 24(1), to respect the judgment of the International Court of Justice in any dispute in which it is party.
This resolution comes in response to the brutal and unjustifiable aggression by Zionist occupation forces against the Palestinian refugee camp in Rafah, which resulted in the death of over 45 individuals, including children and women. The attack also left many severely burned, requiring medical treatment that is now largely unavailable in Gaza due to the destruction of most of its healthcare facilities. A massacre committed after 48 hours after an International Court of Justice ruling called for an end to the attack on the heavily populated city.
And in the same context, China's representative to the Security Council said his country supports Algeria's draft resolution, which represents the minimum measures that must be taken.
China supports the draft resolution circulated by Algeria yesterday, which responds to the overwhelming call of the international community and represents the minimum action the Council should take at this time. We hope all members will put aside political calculations, prioritize saving lives, and support its adoption by the Council as soon as possible.
Several countries also have hailed Algeria's draft resolution, including Russia, which, through the voice of its deputy representative to the Security Council, welcomed Algeria's draft resolution to stop the war in the Gaza Strip. The Russian diplomacy confirmed that the killing and wounding of civilians in the Gaza Strip continues despite the issuance of an order by the ICJ. And the deputy representative of the State of Palestine to the United Nations called on the Security Council to adopt the proposal submitted by Algeria, and he demands to stop the aggression, withdraw the occupation forces, and ensure an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
There's no red line imposed by legality, rationality, humanity that Israel has not crossed. It is now crossing the red line set by the entire world on Rafah. And it is the duty of this Council to uphold that red line. Human lives are at stake. To uphold that red line and to take decisive action to force Israel to halt its military offensive and to withdraw its occupation forces and to ensure an immediate ceasefire. The adoption of the draft resolution put forward by Algeria yesterday would be an important step in that direction.
The UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process on Wednesday urgently called for an immediate return to negotiations and a humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. This comes as the occupation's military assault exacerbate human suffering.
Palestinians in Gaza face another round of mass displacement, with 1 million fleeing from Rafah, many being displaced multiple times. Overcrowded conditions and acute shortage of food, water and medicine have led to misery and spread of diseases. The humanitarian response is hopefully inadequate to address these needs.
Algeria strongly condemned the blatant and provocative atrocities and violations committed by the Zionist occupation in the Gaza Strip on a daily basis, including the aggression against the city of Rafah. In his speech before the 77th World Health Assembly on the health situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East al-Quds and the occupied Syrian Golan, the head of the permanent mission of Algeria to the UN office in Geneva, Rashid Beldahan, expressed Algeria's concern about the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, noting that it is the result of the occupation's arrogance and the guarantees of impunity it enjoys. The Algerian Foreign Minister, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, along with his Chinese counterpart, Mr. Wang Yi, reviewed various issues that are of concern to both countries at the present stage, foremost among them the ongoing Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. A statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry clarified that Minister Attaf and Wang emphasized the need to enhance coordination between the delegations of the two countries at the United Nations Security Council in support of the Palestinian cause, and to uphold the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people that are not subject to compromise or obsolescence. The International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies called on Wednesday for ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and unimpeded access for humanitarian aid. Kate Forbes, president of the IFRC, emphasized the urgent need for a political solution to facilitate a ceasefire and the delivery of aid. Forbes, who leads the world's largest humanitarian network, highlighted the dire situation in Rafah during her visit last February before the Israeli occupation's recent attack on the city. She noted the severe suffering of Palestinian refugees, underscoring the critical need for immediate humanitarian intervention.
The one thing that hasn't changed is we desperately need a political solution that will allow us to have a ceasefire to get aid in. We have to have access. Nothing can change until we have access to get humanitarian aid in. And when I was there in February, we saw the results of so many people, 1.5 million people being pushed to the southern parts of Gaza. and it was atrocious.
And the World Central Kitchen Organization announced that it suspended its operations in the city of Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip, due to the ongoing attacks launched by the occupation army on the city. The organization said in a statement that Israeli operations in Rafah are forcing a huge number of families to flee and become displaced again, and is thus forcing the organization to suspend its activities in Rafah. And in other developments, the Yemeni Houthi group announced on Wednesday that it had conducted military operations targeting 6 ships across the Red Sea and Arabian Sea and Mediterranean Sea. Among the targeted vessels was the tanker Lax flying the Marshali Island flag, which sustained damage from a missile attack off the coast of Yemen on Tuesday. Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sari' stated that the group also attacked the ships Maria and Silidi in the Red Sea, Alba and Mark's Hartford in the Arabian Sea, and Minfera Antonia in the Mediterranean Sea. These coordinated attacks mark a significant escalation in the group's maritime operations. And the head of the Algerian Committee for History and Memory, Mohamed Lahsen Zghidi, revealed in an interview with Al24 News that the Algerian-French Joint Committee unanimously approved for the first time the recovery of a list that includes properties of sovereign symbolism and historical value for Algeria, which were plundered by the French occupation before and during the period of the occupation. Houssam Barkan has more details.
Delving into the depths of Algerian history, the Algerian Commission for History and Memory aims to recover properties, documents, and artifacts looted by the French occupation, shedding the light on the atrocities committed against millions of Algerians. The French Committee has unanimously approved this request and committed to submitting it to the French president to facilitate the return of these properties to Algeria as soon as possible.
The committee has compiled an inventory of property looted from resistance leaders, including Al-Amir Abdelkader. This includes weapons, equipment, clothing, and other items with both symbolic and sovereign significance, reflecting the strength and existence of the Algerian state and its resistance. All these items were submitted to the French president, and for the first time, the list was unanimously approved. Some of these items date back before 1830, including 2,000 cannons taken by France.
The Algerian Committee for History and Memory, adopting a scientific approach devoid of political calculations, confirmed its agreement with its French counterpart to lift the ban on and digitize the military archive, enabling the Algerian researchers to access it.
You have digitized the administrative archive. It is time to digitize the military archive, and we agreed on this principle. The important thing is that first, before I take the original document, which they now see as forbidden, give it to me digitized, so that the Algerian researcher in Algeria can view it.
The Algerian Committee is expected to hold its 6th meeting with its French counterpart at the beginning of next July, during which it will push for the implementation of agreed-upon priorities. This extensive agenda includes addressing the numerous crimes of the occupation, the historical massacres against the population, resistance and national movement, the May 8, 1945 massacres, the Liberation Revolution, and the nuclear explosions in southern Algeria.
Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ahmed Attaf had held bilateral talks with the State Councillor and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Wednesday in Beijing as part of his official visit to China upon the assignment of Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. A statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry explained that the discussions between the ministers focused on the relations of cooperation and partnership between the two friendly countries, particularly assessing the progress made in implementing the outcomes of President Tebboun's state visit to China in the middle of last year. Both parties praised the momentum that this visit has injected into Algerian-Chinese relations and the political consensus it has solidified between them regarding various regional and international developments.
We are also proud of the Algerian-Chinese partnership, as you were the first to support us during our liberation war, and we reciprocated that gesture at the United Nations. The bonds of deep-rooted friendship between Algeria and China date back to our mutual support in liberating our countries and recovering their legitimate rights.
And to South Africa now, millions of South Africans headed to the polls for national and provincial elections. And for the first time since 1994, the ANC risks losing its majority. More details with our special envoy, Usama.
Millions of South Africans went to polls early Wednesday to cast their ballot in the country's main event, the regional, provincial and national elections.
I'm just hoping that we have change, we have new parties, that lead us and show us, new things.
Whatever the outcome is going to be, and let me just say, a party who is going to win, we expect change.
Long queues of citizens of different ages and backgrounds were standing outside voting stations across the whole country to raise their voices for the change they are hoping for.
I'm comfortable with what the process is now. There are no serious infringements or deviations from the normal.
Well, I'm just hoping that we can get the economy back up and running and kind of turn things around, because right now we can't even afford basic cost of living. Well, half of the country can't. So I think that's a big issue.
For the first time since the advent of democracy in 1994, the African National Congress is at risk of losing its outright majority and could be forced to negotiate a coalition.
Competition this year is more intense than 2019 as I was here. This year you have the country has introduced independent candidates that were not there in the previous elections. And more political parties are contesting.
These elections, which are the most hotly contested, are also historic as they mark the 30th year of electoral democracy. However, the picture has not been clear yet to reveal what South Africa's next political landscape will look like. Usama Ayadi, All 24 News, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And joining us now live from Johannesburg, Usama Ayadi. Good evening, Usama Ayadi.
Good evening, Miriam, and good evening to the audience of All 24 News.
Could you provide us with the latest details over there?
Well, we are now at Midrand in the National Election Results Center. We are joined by Mr. Piet Kroukamp, professor at Northwest University and expert in South Africa's election. Would you join us, Mr. Professor Kroukamp?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes.
So to start with, what are your expectations about these elections in South Africa?
Look, we had 300 years of colonialism. We had 50 years of apartheid. Now we had 30 years of democratic rule, but this is our very first competitive election. In other words, the likeliness of the governing ANC party, the one that led the revolution against apartheid, the likeliness of that party getting less than 50% of the vote. There is a possibility, and that is the sign of the consolidation of your democracy when your elections become competitive, and that's where we are now.
Do you think the ANC has lost some of its popularity in the country, especially during the last 5 years?
Yeah, well, during the last 10, 15 years, I would say because of state capture, which means the corruption of the state, economic decline, about 43% of our people in terms of the extended definition are unemployed, 70% of people live in relative poverty to some degree, about 30 million people are on some form of a grant from government, which means it become endemic. Corruption and poverty has become endemic. Economic growth is very, very limited. So yes, there's a degree of disillusionment, and I think people might be starting to look for alternatives. But the ANC is not about to lose its relative majority. It is just about to lose its absolute majority, which means they will still be the governing party after this election, one can assume. But they won't have a clear mandate to govern as they wish. They might have to do it in conjunction with other political parties in a coalition.
Thank you so much, Mr. Piet Kraukamp, professor at Northwest University, and thank you, Miriam. This was an insight or a developed view over the elections in South Africa. As you can see behind me, the table is broadcasting some of the primary results of the election. It says that the ANC has the majority for the moment, according to the results coming from
Thank you very much, Usama Ayadi, for all the insights.
Eastern Cape.
Thank you very much for your insights, and thank you, dear viewers, for following up until here. Thank you very much. Have a good night.